A resilient industry. On this episode of Apex TV 360, we look at the shifts in the aftermarket and how we're driving ahead. I'm Andrew McIntosh with Apex TV 360. The pandemic created changes in patterns and behaviors, but we're starting to see a bounce back in the aftermarket industry. Joining us is Philip Atkins, Director of Strategic Research and Planning for the Automotive Aftermarket Suppliers Association, and Mike Chung, Director of Market Intelligence for the Auto Care Association. Philip, could you start us off with what you saw from quarter one and why you're optimistic for the future?
Well, yes, the first quarter was very strong, both in terms of sales out the door and for new orders. But it's kind of interesting, and I'll tell you what we told our members, kind of the inside story. If you look back at last year, the third quarter was very strong. The fourth quarter was good, a little bit softer. And then as we got into the first quarter of this year, January was sort of soft when you look at parts sales to shops. February was the same, but boom, March really took off. So what was going on were a couple of factors coalescing. First of all, unemployment was coming down. So more people had more money in their pockets and were traveling more in their car. We saw the federal stimulus package kick in. Funds began to flow in March. So that helped a great deal. People got in their cars in March and traveled more. Miles traveled was fairly soft in January, soft again in February, but we saw a big spike in March. So yeah, first quarter was very strong, and interestingly, it sparked a lot of optimism for what's coming next. We're looking forward to having a good second quarter report. I'm about to go out and measure that. And the 12-month outlook was very, very optimistic, sky-high optimism.
That is great. We can't wait to see the results from quarter two. Now, Mike, what are some of the factors that you've noticed?
I actually studied chemical engineering in college, and one of the things that we talked about and learned about was production in factories. You have continuous operations where everything's running smoothly. You set things and you let things run continuously, versus batch operations where it's start and stop. You make a round of production, you stop, you retool, and you make another one. And I think about that as an analogy for our aftermarket, because we were in this steady state, this continuous operation until the pandemic happened. Things were relatively predictable with regards to VMT patterns by season, by repair, by service, parts manufacturing. But then you had this worldwide shutdown with the pandemic, and it was like just turning that whole factory off. And the factory had to retool. It had to reassess demand. It had to reassess labor and schedules, and then reset production schedules and the pacing for that production. And this is really across the board, the entire supply chain for the industry: parts manufacturing, distribution, inventory management, retail, service. When are people taking their vehicles in for service? How many of a unit are on a shelf at the distributors? How often were those parts being replenished on a shelf? So what I saw was that everyone across the industry had to demonstrate agility, and they really had to meet the customer where they are at in order to survive.
Philip, can you tell us a bit about the risks that the aftermarket is facing as we recover?
There are 4 risks that our members are talking about: delays in the supply chain, delays in shipping, the struggle to hire a workforce, and now we're keeping an eye on inflation. So let me do a quick whip around on each of those 4. Supply chain problems, of course, we've been living with them for a year at least now, and everyone is well aware of what their experience is there. So let me just say that the effect is very strong. When we talk to our members, we've measured the level of inputs that they need for manufacturing their goods and running their business. They're as much as 35% below their normal level. So you can imagine the struggle there to keep up with demand. And in the end, fill rates, at least in the first quarter, are 15% below on average than normal. And then there's shipping. Now, shipping's kind of interesting. Where supply chain, we were dealing with shortages. In shipping, we have some shortages, at least in the number of ships available, but we also have a deluge of shipping, because manufacturers are just producing as much as they can and trying to ship it to the US. And the end result is that we have ships stacked up at harbors trying to unload their goods. Now, they've recently come to grips with that, but still, if you take, for example, the ports in the San Pedro Bay, the LA and Long Island, they're dealing with shipping volumes that are 65% above pre-COVID levels. Then there's the workforce and the struggles to get enough workers to man the factory line and the distribution centers. We're having a real struggle with the workforce. And of course, once you hire them, you've got to pay them. And this is a period of time when workers are commanding a little bit higher wages than before. So that leads us to the fourth risk in our big four, and that is inflation. The good news, of course, is that the aftermarket has proven itself to be very resilient through economic downturns, and we've already started to adapt to this one. I mentioned the strong sales, and I mentioned especially the new orders in the first quarter. So the opportunities are out there. We just need to all collaborate so that we manage these disruptions together going forward.
Mike, you've studied the IHS forecast. Can you tell us a little about what it revealed?
Absolutely. So as many in the industry know, that channel forecast model is the kind of a really looked at piece of data to say, well, how big is our industry? What is the trend for the next several years? How bad was 2020? And it's really encouraging because we continue to see steady growth in the industry. And with regard to 2020 and upcoming years, we see quite a fast rebound and consistent growth. More specifically, the aftermarket had been projected to decline by 8.8% in 2020, but it ended up only losing 5.3%. So while the aftermarket declined, it wasn't as bad as perhaps originally forecast. And it's projected to essentially gain all of that and then some this year. It's projected to gain over 11% in 2021 and then grow annually by 4 to 5% a year for 2022, 2023, 2024. And that's really encouraging from a number of fronts, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're a service provider, whether you're a retail store, because the aftermarket has always been a bellwether industry. It's been relatively resistant to seasonal fluctuations. It's comparatively resistant to recessionary headwinds when we compare it to, say, construction or general retail. It's steady, smooth, dependable, reliable growth, and investors love that. So it's really very promising to see that despite the uncertainty, we're seeing life resume kind of as we knew it, and to see the aftermarket continuing to be a promising investment and a promising and high yielding industry in the long term.
As we're looking ahead, I can't let you guys go without talking about APEX. Mike, it'll be your first time attending?
Oh yeah, so I know the whole industry is just really excited to get back to Las Vegas, really excited to see people again. And personally, I think that return to reconnecting in person, being able to meet make new contacts, create new relationships, and just to kind of have fun again.
Philip, anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I think you must attend APEX because there are thousands, literally thousands of insiders at APEX who have grappled with these issues before, and you can pick their brains. You can pick their brains at many networking opportunities. There are execs from suppliers and customers. There are strategic consultants with their presentations, and I'll be there too.
Thank you, Mike and Philip, for your insights. Find more of their breakdown of the bounce back on the APEX blog. Before we go, guess who's attending APEX? Some of the biggest buyers in the aftermarket. Here's just one who's very excited to connect with you at APEX.
I'm Mike Buzzard. I'm the Vice President of Commercial Marketing and Independent Sales for Auto Plus, and I am very excited to get back to APEX in 2021 to really reconnect with our industry, our community, and the relationships that really make our industry special. I think that the automotive aftermarket is poised for an amazing next 2 years. I think we've all seen the macroeconomic trends of what's happening, not just in our country, but across the world. And we are going to be in a unique position to have a phenomenal next 2 to 3 years. And I think that really starts by reconnecting with our manufacturers and with our distributors and finding the ways that we can take advantage of the market and what's going to be in front of us. So I think that for us to really be able to make the most out of this opportunity, Apex is the place to be to position our businesses to really go through and strive and take market share as we move forward together.
Share that you'll be in Las Vegas November 2nd through the 4th on social media. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's it for this episode of Apex TV 360. We'll see you again next time.